This American Airlines flight just took off from Portland, and within a few minutes of departure, they had to declare a mayday.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. We are single engine at this point.
The controller in this video does something I hope never happens to me, but I think if it did, I would probably have a different response, but here's the full audio.
Departure American 1625, 2.2, climb at 7,000.
Okay, this has nothing to do with this video, but I just have to say this. This 2.2 climbing 7,000, the climbing 7,000 is correct. This 2.2 is a habit that I've seen pilots get into. I probably did it at the regionals as well, but you say 2.2 climbing 7,000. If you get that habit really built up and you go fly international, especially if you're in an emergency situation, and you say something like that, they're not going to know what you're talking about because English isn't their first language. So they're hearing 2.2 and they're trying to think like, is that a frequency? Like, what's he saying? They're expecting to hear 2,200. And when you say 2.2 and you're in the habit of saying that, that's what you're going to divert back to in an emergency. So if you ever plan on flying international professionally, don't get in that habit of saying that. Otherwise, climbing 7,000, that's better than 2.2 for 4, which is what I hear a lot of guys on the radio say domestically. Don't get in that habit. That's even worse. So I don't know, something I thought I'd mention. Here's the rest of the audio.
Departure American 1625.
American 1625, point 2.
Yeah, we got an issue. We'd like to level at 4 or 5,000 there if we can.
American 1625, Roger, maintain 5,000. Do you need back to Poland? Do you need assistance?
So we'll level at 5,000. We'll let you know. We're taking a look at it.
American 1625, ready.
And Portland, American 1625, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. We'll need to return to Portland. We've got to shut down an engine here.
American 1625, Roger. Please report on airport. View radar vectors. Conversion 180, maintain 5,000.
180 on the heading, maintain 5,000, American 1625.
American 1625, are you declaring emergency? Do you want the vehicles ready for you?
Yeah, affirmative. Mayday, mayday, mayday. We are single engine at this point. So, yeah, if you want to roll the equipment for us, we'd appreciate it.
Okay, for you nervous flyers out there that watch these videos to understand what's going on the flight deck, you can hear he's at 5,000 feet and he declares his mayday with his 3 mayday, mayday, mayday calls, which is the right way to do it. And you can hear he's not freaking out. So this is with an engine failure, and we're about to find out exactly what was causing it. But he's got this engine failure situation. They're at 5,000 feet, which is not like way up at cruise. That's pretty low to the ground, relatively speaking. And they're not freaking out up there. So just something to note. After he declares the mayday, he tells the controller what he wants.
And Portland, American 1625, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. We'll need to return to Portland. We've got to shut down an engine here.
So he's doing everything correct here. We have a mayday, this is what we want. So it's no, what do you think would be the best? No, this is the thing that we want to do, so the controller knows exactly what the pilots want. Now you as a passenger sitting in the back, you've heard this engine start making a noise or something going wrong. They shut down that engine. Now the pilots are busy flying the plane, but you in the back are thinking, why aren't they telling me what's going on? What's happening? Why aren't they making an announcement? And that's because they're busy up there flying the plane, talking with air traffic control, trying to make sure that the plane flies safely. And I understand you're in the back, you've heard an engine shut down, you're freaking out and thinking, he's not making an announcement because he knows we're gonna die and he doesn't want to freak us out. I can assure you that is definitely not the case. You're about to hear all the things that happen when a pilot declares a mayday like this. But what is really confusing to me is the controller asking this.
American 1625, are you declaring emergency?
So there's two different ways you can declare an emergency. That was the old way to do it, declaring an emergency. Now they have a mayday and a pan-pan. So mayday is like, hey, this is life or death. This really needs immediate attention. Pan-pan's like, we got a situation that we're dealing with, but it's not life or death. So let's say I have an engine failure, just a normal engine died for whatever reason on a 747. That may not even be a pan-pan, but let's just say you could call that a pan-pan. If you have an engine that fails and you only have 2 engines, well, that could be a mayday. Now we're talking life or death. If that other engine doesn't work, it's a real problem. So it's just different for different planes, different scenarios. Does your engine fail because it just fell apart? If you're on a 747 and your engine exploded, well, that's a mayday because you could have part of your wing damage or it damaged another engine, or you don't know, was there stuff hanging off? You don't know what's going on out there. So that could be a mayday. And those really just come to pilot discretionary calls. So the pilot does the right thing. He declares a mayday. The controller says, just confirm you have an emergency. Well, declaring an emergency isn't something that we say anymore, one, but he just said Mayday 3 times. So yeah, I would go ahead and say this is a big deal right now. With the controller asking that, he says Mayday a second time.
Yeah, affirmative. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. We are single engine at this point.
Now, if that were me, I would be thinking, oh man, maybe I didn't transmit it in the heat of battle. I'm busy doing everything and I didn't transmit it, so he didn't hear my Mayday call. That's what I would be thinking if I was that pilot, because pilots tend to put the responsibility on us. If something goes wrong, we think, okay, we messed up. We did something wrong here. So I am guessing he made that Mayday call a second time, thinking, I must not have transmitted it. If he was 100% sure, he would have said, yeah, I declared a Mayday like 30 seconds ago. Yeah, we're in a bad situation here. We need some help. But he declares the Mayday a second time, thinking maybe I didn't transmit it the first time, and to make sure there's no doubts that he needs priority handling. And here's what happens next.
American 1625, how many souls on board, fuel remaining, advises Zulu.
We got 156 souls on board, and we've got 18,200 pounds fuel.
American 1625, turn right heading 250.
All right, right turn 250, American 1625.
American 1625, expect runway 10 right, Alpha District in current, wind 080 at 200, gust 36, altimeter 3026.
All right, 10 right and 3026 on the meter, American 1625.
Now, something to remember here, and I've heard people get trained this way, is that when you declare your Mayday, you can do it with the souls on board and the fuel in time, not in weight. So Mayday, 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 American 123, we need to return back to Portland, 156 souls on board, and then he says 18,200 pounds of gas. So that's what he said, right? So he could have done all that and got that call out of the way, because they're always going to ask for fuel and they're always going to ask for souls on board. Here's the thing to keep in mind is that instead of looking at the actual weight, you need to tell them what you have in time, meaning that 18,200 pounds of gas for them might be 4 hours. But that, I work on my plane, the 74, we work in tons. So that's like a little over 8 tons of gas. Now for me, 8 tons of gas, pucker factor, right? I'm not feeling good inside, no warm and fuzzies. I'm very nervous. And so we have like a basic, very rough, just to give an idea to air traffic control, we just move the decimal point over 1. That lets us know roughly in hours what we have. So let's just say I got 150 tons of gas on the plane. I got about 15 hours of gas, right? So that's just a rough way that we can throw some numbers out there. So if I got 8 tons of gas, you move the decimal point over, I got 0.8 of an hour. So I don't even have an hour worth of gas. We're getting close to the 30 minutes, which is the Mayday fuel. And I'm definitely getting in the priority handling where you can't take any undue delayed vectors. So when you tell them your fuel, instead of telling them the weight, they don't know. Like 18,200 pounds of gas means nothing to me. If you say, hey, I got 40 minutes of fuel, he knows, uh-oh, we need to really move quickly. If you say, I got 4 hours of fuel, okay, that's great. Now he kind of knows what he's dealing with, and every plane is different, but it's good to just kind of figure out a basic, simple math trick for your plane so you can quickly look at it, unless you're a wizard, and I'm no wizard. So that's, for me, the easiest. Move the decimal point over 1. Even someone with my intelligence can figure out how to say, we got less than an hour. Great, now they know we got to get you on the ground. So instead of saying this,
18,200 pounds fuel.
Say we got 4 hours of fuel, if that's what it is. That will let them know exactly what to do with you. Now, the controller does do something that I really like, and that's where he gives them the weather right here.
Alpha District in current, wind 080 at 200, gust 36, altimeter 3026.
That's because the pilots are required to have current weather on the field in order to land. Now, reality is they're probably going to send off for that weather, and they're going to print it off, and they're going to put it in the flight computer, and they're going to get all their performance information. Probably that's all going to happen anyways. But by that controller giving him the weather of what's going on, hey, this is the weather at the field, you know what runway you're landing on, you know what the weather is there, and if you were an emergency and you did need to come in and land, you have a basic rough idea, okay, wind is coming pretty much down the runway and it's windy and gusty. So you have a good idea, and it's not like you're dealing with this fire or emergency or whatever the situation is and you're like, send off for the weather and wait a few minutes and now what do I do? So I really like when controllers do that, not when they go, hey, current information is alpha, let us know when you have it. That's like, you're not helping me here. They're going to be coming around here and landing on 10 right, and the winds are coming from this angle right here. So it's more or less on the nose, nothing to be worried about, but it is definitely windy and gusty. Because when you take off from an airport, you get that same weather information, but it's kind of like you take off and you now just dump that information, unless it was just wild. You'll just dump that information. You're like, great, now on to the next phase of flight. So 5, 10, 20 minutes later, it could be foggy. The weather could have gotten better or worse. So he gives them that, which is great. What he does next as controller is the part that starts to irritate me. Listen to this.
American 1625, turn right heading 280, and what was the reason for the shutdown?
We had a number 1 reverser unlock in our procedures call for a shutdown of the engine.
And American 1625, just verify turn right heading 280.
280 on the heading, American 1625. We will need some delay vectors out here. We got to get our house in order, and we'll let you know when we're ready.
American 1625, Roger, are you able to fly at all, or do you need to stay at 5?
Prefer to stay at 5 if we could.
American 1625, Roger. American 1625, cleared direct scaffold to hold us public, maintaining 5,000. That's for the turn. 20150 is off power report.
The controller needs to know the nature of the emergency, right? And that's pretty common. Hey, what's going on? So that way he can relay to the fire crew, because the pilots are asking for the fire, which is going to come out anyways. You don't really have to ask for that. Anytime you declare a Mayday, all the fire guys, they're ready to go. They've been sitting in that firehouse for weeks waiting for this moment, and they are ready to do something. So that's always going to happen. But they need to know the nature of the emergency. Is the plane on fire? Is there a huge hole in the side of the plane? What is going on? So they can start having an idea and getting prepared for what they're going to be seeing in a few minutes. So that makes sense, and that's totally normal. And I really think that that is very helpful, because if you do have a fire that's going on right now, you want them to be geared up and ready and putting on all their fire suit stuff, so that way they can get you out of your plane that's on fire. Makes sense. But the pilot says that they have this reverser issue here.
We had a number 1 reverser unlock in our procedures call for a shutdown of the engine.
Which is super rare. I've heard of it in a few random scenarios, but it's very, very rare, especially on takeoff, because your throttles aren't at idle. There's a lot of things that normally need to be in place in order for those reversers to open up. Now, he didn't say that it deployed, so I don't know exactly what stage it was in. It could have been that the previous flight they landed and it somehow didn't clip on all the way. I don't know, I'm not an engineer. He didn't say it fully deployed, but it sounded like something wasn't right, and then they had to shut down the engine, which makes sense. The reversers are these things that move as soon as you land. The casing comes back, and it just helps to keep the engine from pushing the plane forward and helps the brakes not have to work as hard when you're trying to stop. You can imagine those coming out in flight would be a real serious problem if it went full deployment like you saw there. When you see a full deployment, that is really to help assist. But if you have it working on one side and not the other side, you have asymmetric power or thrust. So if you have one engine pushing you forward and one engine pushing you back, it would look like this. And this is not what you want when you're trying to fly your plane, especially to climb away from the ground. So immediately he went into a book that we use when you have an emergency like this and you follow the company procedures, which is something, if you do the company procedures, you can never really get in trouble. You said, hey, this happened, I went into your book, I did exactly what you told me to do, and this is what it said to do. And it's going to say something like shut down that engine, because the plane can fly fine on one engine. It cannot fly very well if the other engine is working against your one good engine and making your plane rotate. That's going to be more detrimental than beneficial. There are cases where your plane, let's say, has an engine that's on fire, but it's still producing thrust, and let's say you're in the mountains and you're trying to get away from the mountains. That plane engine that's on fire but still helping push your plane to get away from the mountains, you might just let that thing burn out there and get away from the mountains, and that may not be procedure, but neither is hitting the mountain. In this case, shutting down that engine and stopping it from pushing your plane backwards and causing your plane to rotate more, that obviously makes sense. So they go ahead and go about shutting down that engine, which is their company procedure. And I suspect this controller is asking them about getting above 5,000 feet. Because of this section of the airport here, the minimum safe altitude is 6,000. But on this section, the side that they're on, they'd actually be fine at 5,000. Now let's talk about the part which would really irritate me if I was these pilots in this situation. He tells them to go direct scapo, which from the comfort of your home and looking at this approach chart is really simple. It's right here on 10 right. And then he tells them to hold as published. So he's essentially telling these pilots to fly directly to this point and then fly this oval track here until they're ready to come in and land. Here's the problem. They're super loaded up with taking care of securing that engine, doing the checklist, probably talking with the flight attendants, letting them know, hey, we're going to be going back in to land, so that way they can start prepping anything that they need to prep in order to get ready, maybe making an announcement, talking to air traffic control, following all the checklists that are on the plane, and then this controller is saying, oh, go direct to this point, which isn't going to be on their flight plan, and then they're going to be, obviously they weren't even looking at the plate as far as for coming back, so now they got to go through probably their iPad, because hey, it's 2024, and find that. But when you get told when you're flying direct to this point, you're looking further down your flight plan. They may not have already loaded up that they're doing 10 right. So that might not even be up there. Or they did 10 right, but they didn't go all the fixes. They just did the first 2 fixes. I don't know. But this controller is basically saying, hey, go over here and hold. And by putting the pilots in that hold, in that section, he's kind of like, cool, problem's off me. You can turn circles over there until you're ready, which is great, except for the pilots may not know what that is. And then when you load up a hold, you have to check a lot of things. He says hold as published. So you got to verify that the inbound course is the right way, that you're on the right side, that you're entering the right way. For example, if you loaded it up the wrong way, and this is how he wants you to hold here on the chart, and you're holding this exact same way on the other side, you could be messing up somebody else that's trying to come in and land. So instead of getting on to the PA and making an announcement to little Susie, who's in the back of the plane, literally freaking out right now, you're busy looking in your flight computer in order to try to find this fix so you can get in there and hold. So this makes the controller's life a lot easier, and I guess in theory makes sense. They can stay in that hold and he doesn't have to vector them, but the task level for the pilots in this situation is very, very high. So this controller, I think, is really doing them a major disservice by giving them this other task of having to find it, load it, check it, because they're also doing everything else that they need to do in order to get on the ground as quickly as possible. Even though your engine is secured, it's not a big deal. You could fly around for a couple hours like that. You don't want to. Nobody wants to be up there on one engine. I wouldn't want to be up there on one engine. I'd be like, let's get on the ground sooner than later. But you're taking up their time by having them look for that, try to figure out where to go, load it, check to make sure all the stuff matches the right inbound course. And they easily could have just been given vectors like turn left, turn left, turn left, or turn right, or whatever over the airport. And that would have been easier, because if you're flying, let's say 360 and he says turn right heading 090 and lets them go for a couple minutes, you can just go right 090 and then go back to whatever you're doing, get any performance to land. That's a lot better in my opinion. So this is what happens to the pilots when he says that.
American 1625 to verify cleared scaffold hold as published maintain 5,000.
Direct to scaffold it was for American 1625?
500.
All right, stand by, we're looking for it.
That's on the initial fix from ILS 10 right.
Okay, direct scaffold hold is published, American 1625.
American 1625, find out the place 126.9, be your destination.
226.9, American 1625.
Okay, first things first. I really love that the pilot's being really cool about this situation. He sounds very calm through the whole thing while dealing with an emergency that I've honestly never seen before, and I doubt he'll ever see again in his life. Really rare. So he's sounding cool and remaining calm. The controller is as well. He's doing stuff that's helpful, like, hey, here's the weather on the field, plan this runway, that stuff. He's probably rattled as well, because it's not every day that you get an emergency and have an engine reverser deploy or come out or whatever happened in real life. I don't know. So he's handling it the best that he can, but giving them the hold when they're dealing with 80 other things, that's sucking up time for them. The controller's job here should be tell everybody on the ground to just stop doing departures. Let me just focus on leave this guy over here for a minute so we can get everything sorted out with him. And then the people that are trying to get to Tulsa, Oklahoma can leave 10 minutes later. It's not a big deal. But he's going, okay, go over here and go hold here. So now I don't really have any responsibility, which I don't think is great. He was helping them with the ATIS. He told them what runway without them asking. That's all great because that lets them kind of get ahead without them having to transmit. What runway are we going to? So he's doing things that's helpful, but this holding thing, not helpful at all. And that's why you heard this where you could hear them where they were looking for it, and then the controller had to step in and tell them where to go and find it.
All right, stand by, we're looking for it.
That's on the initial fix from ILS 108.
Now, those pilots could have just said, unable to hold, give me vectors, and the guy probably would have done it. It doesn't sound like he's being difficult, but they could have just said, unable to go to the hold, just give me vectors and I'll tell you when I'm ready, which is probably what I would have done because I'm a big fat crybaby. But he found it and loaded it and did I think a turn and a half or something in the hold, and then they were ready to come in and land. And so it all worked out fine for everybody. But these are the things that when you listen to them, especially if you ever plan on becoming a pilot, that you can think, what would I do? What would I do differently if I was a controller? I would do this. What would I do differently if I was a pilot? I would do this. Like if I was a pilot in this situation, I would hope I would remain that calm because that guy sounds like cool as a cucumber. But what I would definitely do is not take holding. Like just give me a vector somewhere and let me spin circles over there so I can be busy what I'm doing and get stuff sorted out. I know what you're thinking. Well, he can just do circles and he doesn't have to keep talking to him about turning right, turning right, turning right. But the mental effort that it takes to go right heading 090 is that I don't have to think about it. Whereas a hold, you're having to look, verify, check your plate because he's saying hold is published. So you got to verify all that stuff. It's a higher workload. It's a higher stress load. And if you've already loaded up the approach without that in there, you have to reload the approach, reload a hold and do all that. And that's not helpful. But again, I'm a big crybaby, so what do I know? I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.